and a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased."
Mary, thank you. Thank you. So now that we're going live, I want to say hello to the folks at Ponoka. And thank you for being intrepid and coming out, because I'm sure the weather there is just as warm as it is here. And so kudos for coming out in this cold. I think just the fact that we're together warms us up, so that's good. So I've explained here in Basho, but in case you haven't heard in Ponoka, we can tell that Robin's not here, and that's because he and Laurie are in Camrose with Matilda, and wisely chose not to drive home last night and back this morning, but to enjoy a nice relaxed morning before the afternoon show. So you have me today. The stories that we have in the readings for today, which are stories usually for the first Sunday after Epiphany, which is what we are, involve journeys. The journey of the three wise ones, well, the Bible doesn't say there were three, the journey of the wise ones from their home to Jerusalem and to the place where Jesus and his parents were. And the journey of Joseph and Mary and Jesus from their home in Nazareth to Bethlehem, and from Bethlehem to Egypt, and then back from Egypt to Nazareth eventually. So it's about journeys or trips. I think we know something about trips, of going there and hopefully some wonderful surprises, or what we wanted is there. Recently, any of you been on trips? Gary, you're nodding your head, Mary. Where did you go?
We went to Mexico.
You went to Mexico? Ooh, not now, not today, but when did you go?
A week ago.
A week ago.
2 weeks.
And you had a good time? Yeah, cool. And what else? You had the trip from Calgary this week. And was it cooler down there or warmer? The same. So you had the journey through the cold? Yeah. Well, I had a couple this fall, basically. And the second one I took was a trip to Sydney on Vancouver Island, where my mom had lived. Mom had passed away. She passed away just over a year ago now. And through the summer months, I was responsible for her estate and getting that probated and looking after her affairs. And I needed to get back to Sydney to close everything down. And so I did that and went and visited where my sister and I had scattered her ashes. And then I went to Oak Harbor on Whidbey Island, where my sister lives, and helped her celebrate her 65th birthday. And to celebrate in advance, because she was starting in November, her retirement from 20 years of being a high school psychologist. So a lot of things to celebrate there. Coming back, on the one hand, it was the same trip. I mean, you know, from here to Red Deer, from Red Deer to Banff, from Banff to Tsawwassen, from Tsawwassen to Sydney, the Trans-Canada Highway. And I took the same route coming back. So on the one hand, it was kind of just coming back the same way. But it wasn't really. It was really a different trip for me. And I remember as the ferry left Sydney, and because I took the early ferry so I could get to Revelstoke, where I had a room booked in time, I took the early ferry. And as we were leaving, the sunrise was coming up. And it was just beautiful sunrise on the ocean. But I also remembered that I don't know if I'll come back to Sydney. That Mom's not here. And her affairs are gone, and her suite is now lived in by someone else. And will I come? What will happen? I don't know. But it was a kind of goodbye, and it was a sense that I was leaving without her. That there wouldn't be trips back to see her again. There wouldn't be phone calls to check in with her again. And so that change really registered on me, and it was part of the coming back. The other thing I did, I wanted to get there as quickly as I could because I had an appointment at the bank, and then I wanted to get to my sister for her birthday. So I drove down straight. I took a couple nights to stay on the way, but I drove straight there. But coming back, I stopped along the way. And I did some things I'd not done on the highway before. I went hiking. There was a beautiful lake near Hope that I went for a hike around, and there was a Emerald Lake near Field. You've been there. And it's gorgeous, right? And I went, and it was partly sunny and then partly rain, and so it was partly clear and partly muddy. And there were all kinds of people because it's a spot to be at, and everyone hiking was saying hi to each other, and people from around the world were there because it's Yoho National Park, right? And so I had those kind of trips, and I think in a way, those trips were a way of letting the grief work itself through. Being in quiet place, walking, absorbing nature, accepting some of the reality that because I was busy looking after affairs I hadn't really spent time with. And so a way of beginning to get to that. It was also a time of rest, even though it was a trip, because there were a lot of things that I'd spent the summer with, and then the trip to Sydney and to my sisters and so on. So it was a time of healing and a time of renewal for me. Made the trip back a different trip than the trip going. And I don't know if that's your experience. Because we make trips for holidays, trips for vacations, business trips. But sometimes where we go, what we do, who we meet, affects us a bit. And it's a bit different. And that's what's going on in these two stories. I want to think first of what, to borrow from my Catholic friends and my Catholic grandmother, the Holy Family and their trip. And I want to show you. I have these beautiful carvings. Joseph with his bag of whatever it is they need for the trip. They're traveling light. And Mary on her donkey with the infant in her arms, and Joseph leading the donkey on the way. These are made of olive wood from a Palestinian community in Bethlehem. So there's some special kind of mystical connection to them. I got them at 10,000 Villages, which is a network of stores. Well, the donkey's going to go its own way. A network of stores owned by the Mennonites, and they specialize in these stores of bringing things in from other parts of the world, like Palestine, like India, like Africa, bringing beautiful things in and selling them, and all the money goes back to the village where they were made. So there's a 10,000 Villages place in Red Deer, by the way, and I'm sure there's one in Calgary, and there's one in Edmonton, which is where I got these. And that they're olive wood and from Bethlehem, I just really love them. So there's their trip. And if you stop and think, Joseph's had the news that his fiancée is already pregnant, and it's not his responsibility that she is, and all the conundrums that brings for him, and his reputation in society and in the village. And then they do get married, and they do travel to Nazareth, and Matthew's very, very quick on this business. They had the child. And then we get this story about Herod, who is not happy to find out that there is another one, that these three strangers have dared to come and call a new king. And he's king. And he's not happy about knowing that there might be a rival. And so he's going to take extreme measures, and we get a massacre. He's going to kill all the boy children that are under the age of 2, because it was about 2 years ago. He waited to come back for about 2 years. And so then Joseph and Mary take Jesus, and they flee. They become refugees. And they go and find shelter in Egypt, and we know there was a sizable Jewish community in Egypt, and I suspect that's where they went. And they lived there until they got the news that Herod was dead, and they came back home. And I'm thinking about that journey and what was expected. You know, it's a journey. You're going to Bethlehem. Maybe there's relatives there. And you're going to give birth. Mary's going to give birth. And you're going to have a new child. And you'll wait till that child's of an age and comfortable enough and safe enough that you can make the difficult travel back. Mary and I were looking at this beforehand and talking about poor Mary, 9 months pregnant, riding on the back of a donkey on these not gravel roads, rocky roads, right? So to make that trip back when Jesus is a little older and when it's safe to take a child home. And that would have been the plan. And then it gets derailed because now there's a danger looming and they need to change direction and head for Egypt. And only later are they able to come back to Nazareth. And I'm thinking for sometimes our journeys where we're headed, what we're planning, and something hits us sideways, something knocks us, throws us for a loop, something derails us. Maybe it's a severe illness. I still remember that terrible, long 7 months of 2014 and your prayers for me and your support of me. I still remember that. And it throws you off and what you can do and can't do afterwards. Life is a bit different. Maybe it's the loss of someone we love. And life is not the same afterwards. We may get to a point where we can resume our life, may do the things we used to do, may hang out with the people we used to hang out, but somebody's missing. And it's not the same. And that threw us for a loop. Mary and Joseph knew those feelings, I'm sure. And I'm thinking, because whenever I look at these, and the fact that they come from a Palestinian community, I'm thinking, Mary and Joseph and Jesus were a refugee family. And so I can't hear a story about refugee families. I can't meet refugee families as I've done in Camrose without also thinking of this story. And if we all carry Jesus within us, as Robin says, there's Jesus coming again in a refugee story. So I think about that kind of journey. And when something throws us, something unwelcome throws us, and we have to change direction, change course. And then, of course, there's the story of the 3 wise ones, or the wise ones. We don't know how many. I'm in the habit, because we always think of 3 kings and so on, right? And there they are. And these wise men, they're called magi. And the Greek word magi refer to people who are essentially scientists. They were the astronomers of the day. They marked where the stars and the constellations were. But they were practical scientists. They wanted to know the impact, the use of this stuff. So you marked the passage of the stars and the constellation and the phases of the moon so that you could tell people, hey, hang on, the river is going to flood. It's going to deposit that wonderful silt in the field. So get your tools sharpened because it's soon time for seeding. And they would be able to do the same thing. Well, the stars have moved, the constellation's here. Hey, folks, it's time to get ready for harvesting. And they took it further, and they would be able to tell the king, this is a good time to get your children married. And this is a good time to call your children in to the royal circle and decide where you're going to live and what royal duties you're going to have. Not that that's anything to do with us today. So they were scientists of the day. They involved themselves in other things like astrology in order to have some sense of how can we use the science for people's benefits. And they come, and you know the story, they see this incredible star, their research, their studies, their learnings, their traditions tell them that this star is a sign that there is a new king. The king is going to be different. And they want to go and find this king and find out what the impact of this will be. And so they set out. But, well, where do you find the king? Well, go to a capital city and ask the existing king, where's a likely place to find a king? Expecting. They're scientists and they're a little naive about the power structure. Expecting Herod's going to, oh, yes, well, And Herod takes them in. He consults his own advisors. And they come up with this prophecy about, well, in Bethlehem, there's a new king coming. The interesting thing is that Herod cuts off those advisors. He doesn't let them finish the passage. The passage they quote from the book of Malachi, that there will be a new king who will lead the people of Israel, who will be born of a young mother. Yes. And that king will shepherd his people, and that king will bring peace. So Herod didn't listen to the model of kingship that offered. And he's prepared to use these wise ones for his own ends. Go find them, come back, let me know, and then I'll do what I want to deal with. And so they do find. And trying to imagine the excitement when they find the family and they find the child and they want to make their presence. And they do. And then the message, don't do what you'd planned. Don't go back the way you came. Change a course here. Don't go back to Herod. And so they make their way by a different road. And I don't know what happened to them when they got home. Whether that was it, they went back to their research and their studies and life the same way as it used to be, or whether there was something that had changed for them in their lives, we don't know. But there is this moment in their journey, which was a beautiful journey, a journey of excitement and anticipation and getting to their destination, and it's everything and more than they wanted, and something derails them, and they have to change direction too. What I'm finding interesting in these stories is that the wise ones look up to the sky, they look up, they look out, and they see that this is an opportunity. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be a distance. They don't exactly know where they're going to end up, but they're going to make this trip anyway. And there's an openness to this adventure, an openness to going for them on something new. And so there's an openness to taking that road back. Herod understands something new is happening, but Herod's not looking up and he's not looking out. He's looking in and he's feeling his fear. And we know from history, he may be called Herod the Great, but he ought to be called Herod the Great Paranoid, because we know from history he was extremely nervous about any potential threats to his power. He executed a whole bunch of his family, his own kids, his own wives. He had more than one wife. He executed a whole bunch of important people. He was paranoid that he was going to lose his power. And he built forts all over the country because he was paranoid that people would try to overthrow him and he needed to have his forts. He responded out of fear, not out of openness to something new. There's that third journey. Jesus, the grown-up Jesus, goes down to the River Jordan where his cousin John is doing the baptism thing. And Jesus wants to be part of that. And he is baptized. There's a whole discussion about whether John wants to do this and why not, but that's a whole other story. But Jesus is baptized. And it's incredible high. This moment in which he is affirmed, he knows who he is, he has an identity. You are my child, you are my son. As I once put it in another sermon, God is saying to the rest of the world, that's my boy. You're mine, and I love you. You are my son, the beloved. What an incredible affirmation that would have been. And when we know the rest of Jesus' story and what he's going to have to face, what an incredible power that must have given him. But we know that's going to get derailed. We know the journey from Jordan is going to end up on a cross in Jerusalem. But what an incredible affirmation. And then there's this little bit in the Gospel of John that I read last Sunday, tucked in among all these other wonderful words of John, that Jesus, for those who believed in him, Jesus gave the power to become children of God. Power to be as he is, in close, intimate relationship with God, to be part of something more, but to be part of it. And so I'm thinking of all the people who came to that river and who met Jesus and who would meet Jesus later and the impact on their life. Some ignored him. Some kind of, oh, well, yeah, fine, and went back to their lives as normal. Some opposed him. And others, their lives were changed and they were prepared to go in a whole new direction. Change the way they lived. Change the way they understood themselves in relation to God. Change the way they saw the world. And as a result, we're here. I want to tell you about one more journey. Now, I'm not going to spend long on this, but it is a journey I'm making. And it's a journey I think we're all making, but we will see it differently. I'm thinking about the journey of living through this issue around climate change. And here's where I fit in that. I'm prepared to accept the science around that. I've learned about the role of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and how that contains the heat and the devastation of the heat. And I understand those who are saying, look at this situation in Australia with fires that have been burning since September, and this is their 6th hottest summer in a row. I understand those who are saying, look at the changing weather patterns and the impact that this has on people's lives, and that we have to change that because of the impact it's going to have on our grandkids and their grandkids, their grandkids. And I understand, because I'm an Albertan too, and I understand the implications of what it means when our carbon energy is the basis, the foundation for our energy in the way of life. Without oil and natural gas, Lorraine and I would not be keeping our house warm right now. Without oil and gas, I would not have come to Bashaw and got some groceries and be sitting at home having my cereal and my coffee this morning before coming here, or driving here. And we can think of all the more extended things. Without oil and gas, a lot of us wouldn't have jobs. Without oil and gas, our businesses wouldn't survive. Without oil and gas, our small communities might be questioned. So I understand this other part of the story. And for me, the journey is how to make a way through that. I don't believe in compromise. There's no compromise. It's either climate change is happening and it is having this impact, and we have to change things, or we need the oil and gas and the carbon energy, and we can't let go of it. There's no compromising that, well, we'll accept a little bit of climate change and we'll have a little bit of oil and gas. We've got to find a way through this. But the first part, it seems to me, is a way through to how we talk about it. Because I find myself split, and I know I'm not the only one, but I'm the one standing in front of you. I find myself split. And on the one hand, I want to say to my environmentalist friends, sorry, we can't turn the taps off. That's a pipe dream. No. And I want to say to others, but we can't continue the lifestyle we have and the economic basis that we have. We've got to make a change. But how do we do that? And how can we begin to listen to each other, begin to learn from each other? Are we going to take the Herod route and be afraid of what we're going to lose? We're going to take the wise ones and be open that we're going to take a journey together and we're not sure where it's going to lead us, but we're going to take this journey and see what kind of world we can build together. I don't know. It's that journey I'm making. I'm studying more. I'm reading more. And I'm thinking how to have these conversations. Because the question for me is how we live as children of God in a world that God loves, which is a world so divided, and a world so threatened, and yet a world so full of potential. Think of your own journeys. It may be different. It may have to do with changes in family, changes in your life, changes in your thinking of other things, change of experiences. Are we making our way through out of the fear of what we're going to lose, or out of anticipation